There are moments in life when everything seems to collapse at once. The job you relied on disappears. The relationship you invested years into crumbles. The vision you had for your future shatters into pieces. In those moments, it feels as though the ground beneath your feet has been stolen, and you are left suspended in an abyss of uncertainty. It is precisely in these times of despair that a quiet truth emerges. When all feels lost, the universe has a plan for you. The darkness is not a punishment, but an initiation. The chaos is not a void, but a womb of transformation. When something dear to us slips away, when the foundation we have built our lives upon crumbles, we often believe it is the end. It feels as though life itself has turned against us, tearing from our hands the very things we thought defined us. In those moments of loss, despair becomes the dominant note of our existence, and the heart cries out, "Why me? Why now?" It is natural to feel this way, for the human spirit clings to what it knows. Yet, hidden beneath this apparent destruction lies a truth that is seldom recognized until much later. Loss is not the end, but the beginning of renewal. Think of the forest after a fire. To the untrained eye, the blackened ground and smoldering remains appear to be devastation. Yet within the ashes, seeds that lay dormant for decades awaken. New growth, richer and more resilient, bursts forth where old trees once stood. Without the fire, the forest could not be reborn. In the same way, when we lose, we are often being prepared for something our conscious mind cannot yet comprehend. History and human experience testify to this pattern again and again. Consider the life of J.K. Rowling, a woman who stood on the edge of despair, unemployed, struggling to feed her child, and weighed down by rejection after rejection. She might easily have surrendered to hopelessness. To her, each no from a publisher was not just a rejection of her manuscript, but a rejection of her very worth. And yet, those refusals, painful as they were, created the space for something extraordinary. Out of her darkest hour emerged a story that would not only transform her life, but also bring joy and meaning to millions of readers worldwide. In hindsight, what seemed like an endless series of endings was the preparation for a new beginning far greater than she could have imagined. But her story is not unique. How many of us can look back and see that what we once thought was our ruin was, in fact, our liberation? The job that vanished, the relationship that dissolved, the dream that collapsed, all these experiences left us hollowed, yes, but they also carved out a space where something more aligned with our deepest self could take root. It is only when the old is stripped away that the new can emerge. Loss is the great destroyer of illusions. We walk through life carrying identities, possessions, roles, and attachments that we mistake for our essence. But when these are taken from us, when we are laid bare, we are confronted with the question, who am I without them? The shock of that question is painful, but it is also liberating. For in that emptiness, in that silence, we encounter a deeper part of ourselves, one that is not defined by external achievements or fleeting circumstances, but by the eternal spark within. There is a psychological truth at play here. The human mind is built to resist change, to cling to the familiar even when it no longer serves us. Loss interrupts this pattern. It forces us to confront the unconscious attachments we have built and to recognize that they were never permanent, never absolute. It is as if life, in its wisdom, removes from us what we would not willingly surrender, in order to guide us toward what we truly need. Consider the countless people who, after losing their jobs, speak of how it became the turning point in their lives. In the moment, it felt catastrophic. Bills piling up, identity shaken, security gone. Yet years later, many of these individuals reflect that losing their job was the catalyst that pushed them into their true vocation, one they might never have discovered if they had remained comfortable. The loss stripped away the illusion of safety and opened the horizon of possibility. This is why it is said that what feels like destruction is often preparation for rebirth. To be reborn, something must first die. The seed must split, the caterpillar must dissolve in its cocoon, the night must come before the dawn. The same pattern plays out in our lives. The death of an old chapter is the prerequisite for the birth of a new one. It is a painful process, but it is sacred. When you are in the midst of loss, it is nearly impossible to see this. You feel abandoned, betrayed, perhaps even punished. Yet if you look more closely, you will see that every great transformation in your life was preceded by a collapse of some kind. The first heartbreak that shattered you also taught you the strength of your heart. The failure that humiliated you also taught you resilience. The disappointment that brought you to your knees also brought you closer to your true self. Even in collective history, we find this truth. After wars, after plagues, after the fall of empires, humanity has again and again discovered renewal. Entire civilizations have been reborn from ashes. The Renaissance, that golden age of art, science, and philosophy, was born out of centuries of darkness and plague. What appeared as the death of an old world was, in truth, the labor pains of a new one. This is the law of life. Nothing is wasted. The universe is not careless with your pain. What feels like loss is not meaningless suffering, but a necessary clearing. The soil of your life is being tilled so that something new may grow. To resist this truth is to cling to the ashes and miss the fire of transformation. To accept it is to allow yourself to be carried by the deeper current of existence, trusting that what has been taken from you has made space for what is to come. So, when you lose, remember, you are not standing at the end of your story, but at the threshold of a new beginning. You may not yet see the path, but it is already being prepared. Your task is not to despair, but to endure, to trust that what feels like ruin is in fact the necessary breaking open of your life. For only when the old dies can the new be born, and only through loss can renewal truly begin. When we encounter obstacles, our first instinct is often frustration. We feel blocked, thwarted, denied access to the life we believe we deserve. We push harder, we rage against the barrier, we wonder why fortune seems to conspire against us. Yet, in truth, obstacles are not random punishments cast upon us from a hostile universe. They are signals, messages, signs written into the fabric of our journey. They arrive not to destroy us, but to redirect us, to awaken us, and to remind us that life has a deeper plan than the one we narrowly imagine for ourselves. Imagine a river flowing toward the sea. Its path is not straight, nor is it without resistance. When it meets a boulder in its way, the river does not give up, nor does it turn bitter against the rock. Instead, it adapts, bends, and flows around the obstacle. And in doing so, it carves out valleys and canyons of breathtaking beauty, creating landscapes that would not exist without resistance. In the same way, when life places a barrier before us, it is not telling us to stop existing. It is guiding us toward a greater unfolding of our path, one we might not yet comprehend. So often we measure life by our immediate desires. We say, I want this job, this relationship, this outcome, and when we are denied, we see only loss. But what if the obstacle is a form of protection? What if it is life whispering, not this way? Your soul has another road. Many who have faced career setbacks can testify to this truth. Research by the American Psychological Association found that people who experienced forced career disruptions often later found themselves in work that was more meaningful and fulfilling than the path they had originally chosen. At the moment of loss, despair was overwhelming. but looking back, they saw the hand of a deeper intelligence at work, guiding them toward where they were truly meant to be. Think of Thomas Edison, who was told repeatedly by teachers and employers that he was too stupid to learn anything. Every rejection was a wall in his path, a declaration that he was not enough. Yet each wall forced him to turn inward, to rely on his inner vision, to keep experimenting despite failure. Those obstacles did not end him. They shaped him into the man who gave the world the light bulb. Without resistance, without closed doors, without the world telling him no, perhaps his genius would never have been forged into something enduring. Or consider Oprah Winfrey, fired from her first job as a television anchor. To her, that moment must have felt devastating, a door slammed shut in her face. Yet that obstacle redirected her to a different format, daytime talk television, where she discovered not only her voice but a true calling. The dismissal that once felt like humiliation became the very stone upon which she built her empire. The message is clear. Obstacles are not dead ends. They are detours into deeper alignment. They confront us with the truth that what we want and what we need are not always the same. Our conscious mind may cling to comfort, but the unconscious, the deeper self, is always seeking growth, expansion, and wholeness. And the universe, in its mysterious wisdom, arranges experiences that challenge us, so that we are nudged, sometimes forced, into confronting the path that is truly ours. From a psychological perspective, obstacles strip us of illusions. They reveal where we are attached to outcomes that do not serve our growth. When a relationship falls apart despite our desperate attempts to hold it together, it is often because it is no longer in harmony with our inner development. When a door closes on a career we thought would define us, it is often because life is inviting us to explore a vocation more aligned with our true nature. The barrier is not arbitrary, it is purposeful. It is the psyche's way of calling us into wholeness, and yet it is in our nature to resist this. We fight the obstacle, we cling to the old way, we refuse to let go. We treat the rock in the river as an enemy, forgetting that without it, the river would never carve the depth of its channel. If life always flowed without resistance, there would be no growth, no shaping, no beauty carved out of struggle. The obstacle is the sculptor, and we are the stone being shaped. Think about your own life. Recall a time when something you wanted desperately was withheld from you. At that moment, you may have felt abandoned or cursed, but in hindsight, was it not often the case that what you lost cleared the way for something far better? The love that left you prepared your heart for a deeper connection. The opportunity denied you created space for a path more aligned with your gifts. The delay that once enraged you kept you from stepping into something that would have harmed you. There is a story told of a man who missed his train to work and cursed his misfortune, only to later learn that the train he missed had derailed. At the time, the obstacle appeared as pure frustration, but hidden within it was protection, a hidden grace he could not yet see. How many such invisible graces unfold in our lives without our awareness? How many closed doors are in truth the universe guiding us away from harm and toward destiny? Obstacles also teach us resilience. They demand that we grow stronger, that we expand beyond our limited vision of ourselves. A life without resistance may seem desirable, but in truth it would leave us weak, undeveloped, shallow. It is by confronting difficulty that we discover our own strength, our creativity, our resourcefulness. Just as the body strengthens when we challenge it with resistance, the soul strengthens when life presents us with obstacles. When viewed this way, obstacles cease to be curses and become sacred teachers. Each barrier contains a message if we are willing to listen. The universe does not speak to us in plain words, but through the symbolic language of experience. A rejection is not merely a no, it is life saying, there is another way. A failure is not the end. It is life saying, grow stronger, try again, adjust your path. A delay is not wasted time. It is life saying, not yet. Something more must ripen before this can be yours. To live with wisdom is to learn to listen to these messages. Instead of fighting every obstacle, ask yourself, what is this teaching me? What direction is life urging me toward? What illusion is being stripped away so that truth can emerge? When you begin to see obstacles in this way, you no longer live in resentment. You live in dialogue with life, attuned to the subtle guidance that is always present. The universe is not against you. It is for you, but it speaks in a language that is deeper than our immediate desires. When something slips from your hands, it is not a verdict of unworthiness. It is a redirection. When a door closes, it is not the end. It is an invitation to knock on another. The obstacle is not an enemy, but a guide. To recognize this is to free yourself from despair and step into trust. And when you trust, you discover that even the heaviest rock in the river can be the very thing that shapes your soul into its truest form. Transformation is not born in moments of ease or comfort. It is not when life runs smoothly, when all our plans unfold neatly, or when the path ahead is free from struggle, that the soul awakens to its true depth. Rather, it is when we are cast into the unknown, when the lights go out and we are left alone in the darkness, that the deepest transformation begins to take place. Humanity has always known this, even if we resist it in our own lives. Every myth, every great story, every religion carries this truth at its heart. The hero must descend into the underworld before returning with wisdom. There can be no rebirth without a descent. To descend means to lose the familiar world, to feel stripped of what once gave us meaning, to confront the shadows within ourselves and the chaos outside of us. It is never comfortable, and it is rarely welcomed. Yet in this darkness the soul is reshaped. In the absence of comfort, our masks fall away, and we are forced to face our essence. What seemed unshakable crumbles, and what we once avoided within ourselves comes to the surface. The descent is painful, but it is necessary, for without it, the treasures of transformation cannot be discovered. Think of the archetypal hero's journey. Whether it is the story of Gilgamesh, the trials of Hercules, or the suffering of Christ, the pattern repeats itself: descent, struggle, confrontation with death, and finally renewal. The underworld is not merely a place beneath the earth. It is a symbol of the unconscious, of those regions of our psyche that remain hidden until we are forced to meet them. When life brings us to our knees, when all sense of order collapses, we are plunged into this symbolic underworld. And though it feels like death, it is also the gateway to rebirth. The life of Nelson Mandela offers us a living example of this pattern. For 27 years he endured imprisonment, stripped of freedom, cut off from the world, confined to a small cell. What could feel more like descent than that? He could easily have grown bitter, consumed by anger at the injustice of it all. Yet those long years of isolation became a crucible. In that dark place his vision matured, his spirit deepened, and his commitment to reconciliation grew stronger than ever. When he finally emerged, he was not the same man who had been locked away. He had been transformed, and through his transformation, an entire nation was given the chance to heal. His prison was his underworld, and it was precisely there that he found the wisdom he later carried into the light. Our own lives mirror this pattern in quieter, less dramatic ways. Perhaps it is the descent into grief after losing someone we love, or the collapse of a career that once defined us, or the silent struggles with depression, doubt, and fear. These moments feel like exile, like being cast into an inner wilderness where nothing makes sense. And yet, these are the very moments when we come into contact with parts of ourselves that would otherwise remain hidden. The pain strips away what is false and exposes the truth of who we are. The descent burns away illusions, and though it feels unbearable, it is in fact shaping us for a greater ascent. There is an ancient story of the Sumerian goddess Inanna, who descended into the underworld. At each gate, she was forced to remove one of her garments until she stood naked before the queen of the underworld. She was judged, humiliated, and struck down. Yet from this descent she was resurrected, returning with a deeper wisdom and power. This myth captures a universal truth. In order to transform, we must surrender what we cling to, we must be stripped of our defenses, and we must face ourselves in our naked vulnerability. Only then does rebirth become possible. The descent also invites us into confrontation with our own shadow. In the light of ordinary life, we avoid our fears, our insecurities, our repressed desires. But when life pushes us into the depths, when the old structures collapse, the shadow emerges. We see the parts of ourselves we had hidden, the anger, the weakness, the longing, the despair. At first, this is terrifying, for it feels as if we are unraveling. Yet the shadow is not our enemy. It is the part of us we must integrate if we are to become whole. To descend is to meet the shadow, and to meet the shadow is to claim a deeper authenticity. Think of those who have walked through addiction and come out the other side. Their descent into darkness often feels like destruction, the loss of health, relationships, dignity. Yet those who endure, who face their own shadow and begin the work of healing, often emerge with a depth of compassion and wisdom that can only be born from the depths. Many go on to guide others through the same darkness, their suffering transformed into service. Without the descent, there would be no transformation, only a shallow existence untouched by the fire of truth. This is why comfort rarely brings transformation. Comfort preserves us as we are. Descent remakes us into who we are meant to be. It is only when life tears us from what is familiar that we are compelled to grow, to confront the unknown, to discover inner resources we never knew we had. The descent strips us down, but in the stripping, it prepares us to be remade. Yet we resist this truth. When darkness comes, our instinct is to fight, to deny, to cling to the life that is slipping away. We see only loss, never the hidden gift. But if we can endure, if we can trust that the descent has meaning, then the darkness becomes a sacred passage rather than a curse. What feels like death is in fact the beginning of transformation. And though each descent is deeply personal, it also connects us to something universal. Every person who has ever lived has walked through their own underworld, through grief, through failure, through despair. To descend is part of being human, and to emerge renewed is the mark of the human spirit. When you find yourself in the depths, remember that you are not alone. You walk a path that countless others have walked, and just as they returned with wisdom, so too can you. The descent is not the end of your story. It is the necessary passage into a deeper truth. It may strip you bare, it may confront you with your darkest fears, it may feel like annihilation. But within that darkness, a transformation is quietly unfolding. When you rise again, and you will rise not as who you once were, but as who you were always meant to become. In those moments when life seems to have stripped you bare, when all that once gave you direction has been shattered, and you are left in the silence of despair, there arises within you a choice. You can surrender to hopelessness, to the voice that tells you all is lost, or you can hold to something deeper, a trust not in appearances, not in the fragile certainties of the moment, but in the hidden intelligence of life itself. Trust is not naive optimism, not the shallow insistence that everything will be easy, nor the denial of pain. It is a deeper knowing, a quiet faith that the darkness has meaning, that the collapse is not without purpose, and that life, in its wisdom, is unfolding a design far greater than the one you can presently see. To understand trust, imagine the seed pressed deep into the soil. From its perspective, being buried feels like death. The light is gone, the weight of the earth presses heavily on every side, and there is no sign of escape. If the seed had a voice, it might cry out in terror, believing that it had been abandoned. Yet, unseen by the seed, a miracle is taking place. The very pressure of the earth is what awakens the life within it. What seems like burial is actually planting. What looks like an end is in truth a beginning. The darkness is not its enemy, but the necessary womb for its transformation. In our own lives, we too are planted into darkness. The failure that devastates us, the relationship that ends, the dream that dissolves, all of these experiences feel like the earth closing in, suffocating us, stripping us of light. Yet, if we can trust, we begin to realize that beneath the surface, something is taking root. A transformation is unfolding quietly, invisibly. We cannot see it yet, but the roots are stretching deeper, the foundations are being laid, and the bloom is preparing to break forth. Trust is the bridge between despair and renewal. Without it, we wither in the darkness, consumed by fear. With it, we endure the night, knowing that morning will come, even if we do not yet see the first light of dawn. A psychologist once described resilience as the ability to see tomorrow. That is precisely the nature of trust, not the denial of pain today, but the faith that tomorrow carries meaning that today cannot yet explain. Think of those who endure long seasons of suffering. The person battling illness, who lies in hospital rooms unsure of what the future holds. The refugee forced from their home, stepping into a land of uncertainty with nothing but hope. The parent working tirelessly to feed their children despite overwhelming odds. What allows them to endure, to take the next step, to rise again each morning? It is trust, not in guarantees, but in the possibility that life is still worth leaning into, that something better waits beyond the present moment. Trust is not always easy, for the mind demands evidence. The rational voice cries out, "Why believe when everything proves otherwise?" But trust belongs not to the rational mind, but to the soul. It is an orientation of the heart that says, even in the darkness there is meaning. Even in despair there is a thread that will lead me through. To trust is to surrender control, to admit that we do not see the full picture, and to lean into the deeper current of existence that carries us forward nonetheless. History and human experience give countless testimonies to the power of trust. Think of Viktor Frankl, who survived the horrors of the concentration camps. Surrounded by death, stripped of dignity, facing suffering that most could not imagine, he held to trust, not in immediate deliverance, but in the meaning that could be found even in suffering. He later wrote that those who endured were not necessarily the strongest or the most physically resilient, but those who could hold on to a vision of tomorrow, who could trust that their suffering was not meaningless. From the darkness of the camps, he emerged with wisdom that continues to guide millions, that even in despair, life holds a purpose, and that trust in that purpose can sustain the human spirit against unimaginable odds. Trust is also what allows us to see endings differently. We are conditioned to view endings as failures, as moments where life denies us what we long for. Yet trust teaches us to see that endings are often beginnings in disguise. The seed must end as a seed to become a tree. The caterpillar must dissolve in darkness to emerge as a butterfly. In the same way, the chapter that closes in your life may feel like ruin, but trust invites you to recognize it as the soil in which a new story is waiting to grow. In relationships, for example, the heartbreak of loss can feel unbearable. The absence of a loved one, whether through separation or death, leaves us feeling as though the world has gone hollow. Yet many who endure such loss later discover that it deepened their capacity for love, compassion, and connection. The trust that carried them through the darkness allowed them to emerge more whole, more human, more attuned to the preciousness of life. The very thing that seemed to break them became the place where they were remade. Trust also teaches us patience. We live in a world obsessed with immediacy. We want answers now, healing now, clarity now. But trust reminds us that the deepest transformations take time. Just as the seed does not sprout the day it is planted, our own growth unfolds slowly, often imperceptibly. The darkness must be endured, the seasons must pass, and only then will the first green shoot break the soil. Without trust, we dig up the seed in impatience, destroying the very process meant to give us life. With trust, we wait, knowing that growth is occurring, even if we cannot yet see it. And so, when life buries you in shadow, remember the seed. When the ground shakes beneath you and all you have known is taken away, remember that what feels like burial is often planting. Trust is the bridge that carries you from darkness into light. It does not remove the pain, but it gives you the strength to bear it, the vision to see beyond it, and the faith to endure it. In trusting, you align yourself with the deeper rhythm of life, a rhythm that has carried every seed, every river, every human soul from darkness into light since the beginning of time. When we look closely at the nature of suffering, we begin to see that it rarely ends with the individual alone. Pain isolates us in the moment, but when it is carried long enough, reflected upon, and eventually integrated, it becomes a bridge back to others. There is a strange paradox here. What once made us feel alienated and separate can become the very thread that binds us to humanity in the deepest way. The universe, in its hidden wisdom, often uses our struggles not merely as trials for endurance, but as preparation for service. That which once nearly broke us becomes the very source of healing for those still wandering through the same shadows. Imagine the story of someone who has survived addiction. For years, they may have felt consumed by chaos, trapped in a labyrinth with no visible exit. Their days were filled with guilt, shame, and the relentless cycle of falling and rising, always uncertain whether they would make it to the next dawn. Yet for many, the story does not end in ruin. Through recovery, through the painful but steady journey of rebuilding themselves piece by piece, they emerge transformed. And what happens then is something remarkable. They discover that the depth of their suffering has granted them the ability to speak a language of pain that others still lost in that world can understand. Their words carry authority not because they have studied it in books, but because they have lived it in their own skin. Their scars do not repel, they attract because they signal survival. Their struggle becomes their gift. We see this pattern reflected again and again in the human story. Those who walk through fire often become the most powerful carriers of light. The cancer survivor who sits beside the newly diagnosed and whispers, "I know what you're feeling, I have been there." The refugee who, after losing everything, dedicates their life to helping displaced families find stability again. The parent who has lost a child and then creates organizations of support for grieving families. None of these people asked for their wounds, but once those wounds were carved into their lives, they discovered that they carried within them the capacity to become vessels of comfort, understanding, and transformation for others. The universe seems to weave a hidden symmetry. The places where we have been broken become the places from which healing flows outward. It is tempting especially in the thick of our pain, to believe that suffering is meaningless. We ask, why me? Why this? Why now? And in those moments answers rarely come. The darkness feels heavy and meaning feels absent. But time and reflection reveal that what feels senseless in the present can later become the very thing that shapes our destiny. Carl Rogers, the humanistic psychologist, once remarked that what is most personal is most universal. The wounds we carry may feel utterly private, yet when shared, they often strike a chord of recognition in others. They become stories of collective significance, not just personal survival. Consider, too, how societies themselves have been transformed by individuals who carried their pain into the public sphere. Viktor Frankl, who endured the horrors of the concentration camps, did not emerge with bitterness but with a profound philosophy of meaning. His suffering became the seed of man's search for meaning, a book that has guided millions across generations through despair. He could never have written it had he not endured what he did. His suffering, unfathomable as it was, became a gift not just to those who knew him, but to the world itself. The universe, it seems, entrusted him with a wound so that through his life, humanity could glimpse a deeper truth about resilience and purpose. We must also recognize that the gift does not always come in grand, world-changing gestures. Sometimes the transformation of struggle into service is quiet, almost invisible. It might be the friend who, after years of depression, learns how to listen without judgment and becomes the lifeline for someone else's darkest night. It might be the child who grows up in poverty and later works tirelessly to ensure other children have opportunities they never had. The size of the stage does not matter. What matters is the authenticity of the offering. Every struggle carried and integrated becomes a potential source of wisdom for someone else. There is also something profoundly healing in this act of service itself. When we take what nearly destroyed us and use it to guide others, we redeem our own suffering. The pain no longer feels wasted, meaningless, or cruel. Instead, it becomes woven into the greater tapestry of life. We begin to see that we were entrusted with it not to carry it alone, but to transform it into a gift that radiates beyond ourselves. Psychologists often speak of post-traumatic growth, the phenomenon in which individuals, after enduring significant trauma, emerge with a deeper appreciation for life, stronger relationships, and a clearer sense of purpose. This is not to romanticize suffering, but to recognize that within it lies the possibility of profound transformation. If we reflect deeply, we may even see that our struggles position us uniquely to serve. No two lives are identical, and therefore no two wounds are identical. Your particular journey, the exact shape of your losses, the precise contours of your despair, whips you to speak into the lives of others in a way no one else can. The universe does not waste anything. What felt like senseless ruin may, in the grand design, be preparation for you to become a bearer of light for those who will cross your path. This is why it is so important not to hide or bury your struggles once you begin to heal. There is a temptation to cover our scars, to pretend we have never walked through the valley of shadows. Yet it is precisely those scars that become the most powerful testimony. A scar is proof that healing has taken place, that survival was possible, that the wound is no longer open. In sharing it, we extend hope to others. If I survived this, perhaps you can too. The universe has a plan far greater than survival alone. It seeks to turn our private battles into sources of collective strength. It seeks to turn the labyrinth of despair into a path that others may follow out of darkness. And in this way, our lives become more than just stories of endurance. They become stories of meaning, stories that ripple outward in ways we may never fully see. The truth is, no struggle is wasted when it is brought into the light of service. The grief, the heartbreak, the illness, the failure, the loneliness, each has within it the seed of transformation. And when we allow that transformation to take place, we discover that the universe has entrusted us with something sacred, the ability to turn pain into wisdom, despair into hope, loss into love. That is the alchemy of the human spirit, and it is through this alchemy that our struggles truly become our gift to the world. So when all feels lost, remember this: you are not abandoned. You are being redirected, refined, and reborn. Loss is not the universe closing its hand around you. It is the universe planting you in the soil of your next chapter. Trust the process, embrace the descent, and know that one day you will look back on these moments not as the end of your story, but as the very beginning of who you were always meant to become.